So I have a loose sheet of tracing paper that I will tape it down for a bit, and I'm going to create at least three by 5 inch rectangles. Now they could be landscaped or they could be portrait. It's up to you. You saw some of the examples that people have done prior, and they are both done. Some people landscape it, some people keep it portrait, and it's up to you what you decide to do. I will encourage you to do both. And I also encourage you to do more than what's required. You're only required to do 3, but it's always best to do more. The more thumbnail sketches you have, the better. Especially when you have more to choose from, it makes things a lot easier. As an artist, as an illustrator. So let's see. So generally what I like to do is I switch this over. Let me fix that. So when I create my format, I do as many as I can, as many that can fit in here. I don't know if I can fit a 5th. There we go. So I have some landscape first. This very last one will be portrait. And because we're using a T-square and a triangle, it makes it super, super easy. You should be as precise as possible, but it's not incredibly important at the moment. I mean, definitely use your drawing tools, and I would strongly suggest that you be as precise as possible. It cuts down on a lot of headache later on. And because I'm going to be showing you how to import these thumbnails into Photoshop, or how to scan them and bring them into Photoshop to not so much to manipulate them, but to clean them up and correct anything that needs to be corrected as far as the contrast. Sometimes some of these corrections can be made. Anything that's messed up with your formatting can easily be fixed. So I usually keep them about 1 inch apart. It makes it a lot easier. You only have to measure a couple times for this to work. It's 5. So I've given myself quite a bit of space to do the thumbnails in both landscaped and portrait. So right now I have 6. I'll actually do this in blue. You don't have to do it in blue. I'm doing it in blue so it'll show up on camera, and so you guys can actually see it pretty well. So when you set this up in advance, it makes it alleviates a lot of headache. Now, your educational goals may not be an illustration, and it doesn't necessarily have to be for you to learn how to plan out a drawing effectively, especially if we're learning some pretty rigid approaches to using perspective. Now, towards the end of the semester, you have an opportunity to really exercise the artist part of you, and to tell a story. Okay, so I have 6 laid out here, and I'm gonna take my tape off so I can figure out what I want to do with my thumbnail. Each one of these has the potential of becoming a decent drawing in 3-point perspective, or a decent sketch in 3-point perspective. Not all of your thumbnails are going to be great. In fact, if you do 10 of them, 1 of them might be great. 1 of them might be just okay, but it's enough that you have something to start with. So when you look at this, obviously this looks like 2 walls and a floor. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stick with that. I mean, you can change it, you can alter a thumbnail as you wish. Let me fix the lighting a little bit. A lot of the time when people use grids to figure out a composition, they feel like they have to just stick with what's in front of them, and it can change. For instance, if you didn't want to use this and you want to have something more dynamic, you can certainly use the other grid. Or use another grid. It doesn't have to be this grid. So you can see that this grid is quite a bit larger. There's a larger floor space. This wall's further back, and this is one that we just practiced on, how we can modify something. So you can see just by moving this around, things can change. Now, as you guys know from previous lessons, when we've created a standard formatting like this, you can blow out the walls, you can change them. You don't just have to leave them as they are. You can blow out this wall, you can move a wall. There's multiple things that you can do. Also, actually, this is actually off. It's 3, but I think I made it 6. Let me see. No, that's 5. Okay, just looks off for some reason. Okay, so because I've landscaped it, Now there's even more possibilities, because now I have a lot of floor, maybe a little wall, but with this I can even change the floor. I can put a staircase going up to this floor. I can actually create multiple floors with this, or let's say multiple levels based on this. So we'll talk about that today during the thumbnailing. Okay. So by telling you that, I don't want you to feel like you're limited to just the planes that you see. So I'm going to tape this down. Also with this, because this is 3-point perspective, you can do some pretty dynamic stuff. So if we just look at this one here, you can do some pretty dynamic stuff by just turning the picture plane, or let's say turning the camera. Now your perspective is the same. Your storytelling can be the story that you're trying to tell, or the image you're trying to portray, can be even more dynamic depending on how you turn your picture plane. And so we can talk about that a little bit later. But let me just do something really standard here with this. So I'm going to register this with my straight edge. And I strongly recommend you do that too, so it at least stays straight for the moment. In fact, I'm going to do something like this. There we go. Now, however, whichever thumbnail that you are, whichever formatting you're using, you don't have to be 100% sold on this format. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You can certainly change it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do something really basic. And I'm going to use this corner to refer to, but I will certainly change it up. So what I'm looking at for big shapes. So I have, or big forms. So I have the floor, I have this left wall, and I have this right wall. Now, because there's so much floor, I have opportunities in front of me. So I'm going to do something really basic at first, and then I'll do another thumbnail to modify it. So let's say these are the 3 corners I have to use. Let me use my large ruler. Now, because this is a thumbnail, a lot of the things, now you can use a standard scale. You can certainly use, like, let's say for every square represents 1 foot square, or 1 square foot. However, that would mean that this space that I'm attempting to draw is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 feet wide by 6 feet wide on another wall. It's not that large of a space. That's only 54 square feet possibly that I would be drawing. But the problem is it's very small. So you can increase the scale if you want to. You can say for every square represents 2 feet. So instead of this being 9 feet, this could be 18 feet and this could be 12 feet. Okay, so you can change that. Now, because we're not using, now you can use the scale as a guide. Now we're not using a specific measurement because, as you guys know, this is an informal grid, so we can't say that each one of these actually is 3/4 of an inch like we've used in the past. So a lot of what we're going to be doing is like comparative measurement. So let's say that I make this Let me see. Let's say every one of these squares, let's say it is, for every one of these squares represents 2 square feet. So it's 2, 4, 6. And half of that, or almost half of it, is 7 feet. So if I wanted to put a door here, something like that could work. I can use my right vanishing point because we can see it on our grid. And if I say that this is, if I say this is 4 by 7 feet, that means anything that I draw has to be compared to this. So if this is an interior space and I put a window next to it, I will probably not put a window above, I mean, I could put a window above 7 feet, but if it's a window, oh, let me see.
The little thumbs down.
Oh, really? You know why? It's not, yeah, it senses hand motions. Strange. Okay. So I can say that this is 4 by 7 feet, and if this is 4 by 7 feet, whatever I do, I can compare it with that. Let me turn the contrast on. There we go. That works a little bit better. Okay, so if I create a window, and you know, this is like based on what we've done in the past. Let's say a window is no higher than 7 feet. I mean, it could be higher than 7 feet, but oh, let's say it's a double door. Let's say it's, and I don't know, what if it's a living room and has a large picture window? Sometimes these picture windows are about 2 feet from the floor and they go all the way up to the ceiling. So if this is 7 feet, this is 9 feet. Let's do 12 foot. We'll do it right below 12 feet so we can see it.
You got your bubble again, Chris.
Really? I wonder what the gesture is.
I don't know, but you can't follow along.
What's that?
You can't follow along.
What do you mean? Oh, no, I know.
It froze again?
It froze again. I have a feeling that might be why it was freezing. Too many hand gestures.
Is that why I got very
Okay. Nothing. Okay, cool. Oh, jeez, what a pain in the ass. Okay. Well, I got all the audio and video. So, with that said, so I'm keeping this really basic. As you can see, this is a two-panel doorway, and then I have this large picture window. Now the picture window is totally off camera, so seeing this, I mean, it may or may not work. We don't know. But the whole purpose of doing a thumbnail is to kind of plan things out. So with something like this, you know, I'm looking at it going, you know what, this is not, there's not a lot of space here, and so I might want to do something a little bit different. Maybe change the space and not use these 3 walls. So look what happens if I were to, let's do this. I'll create a, not a false wall, but I'll put a small wall here. which sometimes happens in a interior. Or you possibly have another doorway. There's a threshold for another doorway, but then you have something like this where you can actually see the space continuing. So I'll do this in blue really quick so you guys can see. Now this in itself doesn't do too much, but it does solidify an initial idea.
So for these thumbnails, you don't want them to be like doodles, right? You actually want us to use the grid.
You need to use the grid, yeah. These are not thumbnail sketches like you would do in how could I say it? These aren't haphazardly done or executed. They should be executed in a way where we can actually understand what your thoughts are behind it. So you can see that just by adding this little addition, the space actually looks extended way past what the grid is showing. Does that make sense? Okay. And sometimes what you can do as well is, if it's a little bit hard to see on the grid, you can put some minimal shading on it, just so you can actually see the space a little bit. Now, I don't recommend doing that right away. This is just something to think about. Some food for thought.
Does that help you separate the...
So it does help break things up a little bit so you can actually see it. Now, is this an effective thumbnail? No, by no means is this an effective thumbnail, because this is just a floor and a couple of walls. Now, but with this can give way to something else. This can give way to an additional thumbnail.
So don't turn that in.
No, because, you know, one of the things you have to think about when it comes to doing thumbnails is, what are you trying to convey? So it always starts with your idea. What is the story you're trying to convey? Is it an interior? Is the story you're trying to convey, what's the most compelling thing about it? So see, if I could do probably something very similar to this. So let me just show you. So this is where it started, right here, which is kind of like this. But if I were to turn it, I can still show the same thing, but I would actually have a lot more space that I could use. So let's say I wanted something like, let's say something like that. Now, my paper, it's not straight, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, because this is 3-point perspective. And it all depends on the kind of story you're trying to tell. So with this, I want to blow out this floor. I want to possibly push the floor back a little bit with this one. So what if I push it back this far? Now by doing this, I can still use these lines converging to the vanishing point, even though it's not a wall. This is now possibly going to be a floor. Let me see. Oh, you know what? Well, we'll do this. Now, you can rough out your thumbnail sketches if you like to begin with, but when it comes to the critique, you need to make sure that your forms that you're creating are nice and crisp and easy to understand. So you can freehand the whole thing if you like, but then you are going to have to redo it so we can actually understand the space set. I mean, for the critique, we need to be able to understand what you're doing. So you need to make sure your forms are spot on.
So Professor, in our critique on the thumbnails, are we going to have to show our grid behind it?
No, not necessarily. Okay, so but it needs to be based on a grid, certainly. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the middle. Oh, this is the middle right here. Okay, so I have an arch. I want to make sure the arch is drawn correctly. Even though you're not going to see all of this, I will go through the process of making sure that the arch is drawn correct. So for preliminary thumbnails, like if I were freehanding this, I would actually do it in perspective first. Or use decent enough perspective so I can at least get my drawing, so I can have it at least looking like I'm thinking about perspective. It will certainly help in the storytelling process. So you can see how the grid can really help with this. If I were just doing some, like a block wall or a rock wall. And because it is rock or hand-hewn stone, I don't have to be super perfect with it. It certainly gets the idea across pretty quick.
Professor, the images that we're to download, do we need to download them on Canvas or bring them in, or?
You need to put them on Canvas. Yep. No, you don't need to work on them off of Canvas, but they do need to be on Canvas.
The thumbnails?
No, our reference. We have 5 of them, I think.
At least 5. I recommend you guys do more. Okay, so let's say it's something like this, and then I have what if it's tile here? I can obviously use the grid for this. Again, with something like this, it doesn't have to be super perfect. It's especially if this is supposed to be old. And what if it's not brick? What if it's not cobblestone? It could be rock, but you still have to use perspective to make it work. But this is just implied texture.
We don't need human form in this final.
Not in the thumbnail, no.
In our final project, do we need?
If you've taken figure drawing, yeah, probably. If you're an animation student, you should probably put it in there. Okay, so I'm just roughing this in really quick.
For the reference, pictures that can we use stills from like video games that you take yourself?
Yes. Okay, guys get the idea?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, again, I didn't use the exact portion of the grid as you had seen it. I mean, it was the actual corner is actually here, so I didn't actually use it the way I actually blew it out. I brought this down and changed the floor. So what would this mean for us? What if you did have a figure? Maybe 2 figures. You could have a figure down here. Now we're going to talk about placing figures in perspective on next week as well, because I know that's something that some of you are thinking about. So let's see. Now you don't have to apply any value to these, but if you feel you need to, you can certainly do that. But you can see how simple and rough that you can make them. Now, this is as sketchy as I would want to see it, a thumbnail sketch. Now, keep in mind, I did base it on something that was very rigid at first, and then I certainly applied texture and pattern here just to help sell it. If I tell you, if I just turn in a thumbnail that was like, an archway, a wall, and I say, oh, this is a brick wall, and it doesn't really help sell it. But if I imply that there is some texture, or there is a pattern, and even go even further and just add a few different values in here, it transforms something from a line drawing to something that's helps tell a story, especially once I put two figures in there. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So this is landscaped. In portrait, it's kind of done the same way. Portrait unveils a lot of different possibilities because you have a lot more vertical space that you can use.
What's mostly used by the
This one is the landscape is mostly used because they actually feel safe using it. It's something that they use throughout the entire semester. The more compelling ones are the ones that are portrait. So look how much more space I have. So if you look at this right here, okay, what if I saw this and like, you know what, I like this, but I want to see what's down here. It's like, what is that? Is that a pit? You know, what could that be? Now, look at this here. You can see these two. You can see the format of these two right here is almost the same, except I have a little bit less wall here. But look how much more I have here. There's a plethora of stuff I can do. I can even move it here. I can still capture the arch. I don't have to draw the whole arch, but I can still capture the arch and have all of this that can lend itself to something bigger and better, possibly. So depending on how you turn your picture plane, which this is a picture plane, I mean, you can change things. Even with this one, let's look at this one here. This one here is basically like that. But look how much more space I would have. I mean, this one right here. Look how much more space I would have if I were just to move the picture plane. I would have a lot more space, at least to show more of the floor. So depending on how you want to use it. This area is a good place to start because it shows the depth of the floor plane and these two walls and unveils a lot of possibilities. I will tell you, students sometimes get stuck when they do a thumbnail up here and all of a sudden they're like, well, you know, I just have two walls, and all of a sudden they turn in a thumbnail of something of just two walls. They haven't explored. Like, let's say they did like this because of how much space, you know, because they have all of this wall space, but they never dawned on them that they have a wall here and then they have a floor here that they could use. They limit themselves to just the grid, what the grid gives them. All right, but you guys can bring it to life depending on how you want to use it. Okay, so that's why doing something like this, you can see these two compositions are not all that different. There's a lot of possibilities here, and even with this, you guys have the ability to add walls. You can add space however you want to add it. Okay, there's a lot of different things that you guys can do. Okay, so let's see how you guys do.